Most people saw this chart last week and felt really good. CEEW, Council on Energy, Environment and Water, one of India's most credible energy think tanks, had published it. On 6 July 2026, at 11:46 in the morning, half of India's electricity was coming from clean sources. Solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, for the first time ever. People shared it, people liked it. Some of them probably got excited and even bought a stock in a power company. But read the line directly underneath that headline. Non-fossil sources make up over half of India's installed capacity, yet contribute only about a quarter of electricity generation on average, which makes the brief peak on 6 July notable. Half the capacity, a quarter of the power, that gap between the headline and the fine print is exactly where investment decisions go wrong. India's energy transition is real. It is one of the largest investment stories of this decade. Nobody is questioning that, but the transitions are complicated. And complexity is exactly where most investors stop reading. The question is not whether clean energy is rising. It obviously is. The question, the one that actually matters for your money, is who profits from the rise, who bleeds, and who quietly collects while everyone else argues about coal versus solar. That answer is not in the headline. It never has been. It is in that second sentence, and that is what we are decoding for you today on DeKoder. Why does this matter to you? Because whether you realize it or not, you are already in this trade. If you hold a mutual fund in India, there is a very good chance you own this sector. Infrastructure funds, PSU funds, Nifty 50, it's in there. And the scale of what is coming is not small. India's own National Electricity Plan puts the investment requirement at 33.6 lakh crore for power generation alone, just in this decade. That is roughly $400 billion in one sector in 10 years. India's entire manufacturing ambition, the electronics, the semiconductors, the AI infrastructure, runs on one assumption: the lights will continue to stay on, that the grid does not trip at 7 p.m. If you remove that assumption, the rest of the story falls apart. Let's start with the headline numbers. India's total installed power capacity is now 530 to 540 gigawatts. Solar alone is roughly 28% of that. Wind adds another 11. More than half of all installed capacity now comes from non-fossil sources. The government's own year-end review says that India has achieved its Paris Agreement target of 50% non-fossil capacity 5 years ahead of schedule. It's extraordinary and even historic, but almost equally irrelevant, because what actually happens on the grid every evening is what matters. Here's why the 7 p.m. matters. Installed capacity is what you build. Generation is what you deliver. They are not the same thing. Coal is around 42 to 43% of what India has installed, but it delivers around 70% of the electricity that actually reaches you every day, every evening without fail. Clean sources like solar, wind, hydro, nuclear combined are more than half of installed capacity, and on an average day, they produce roughly a quarter to a third of the units that actually hit your wall socket. And that 50% moment everyone shared, it lasted only a few minutes. It happened around noon on a Monday on a mild day when system demand was 221 gigawatts, well below India's actual peak load. The annual average tells a quieter, harder story. So why does this gap exist? This is the duck curve. It explains everything. Solar gives you a beautiful hump in the middle of the day, but India's real stress test is in the evening. When does India actually need more electricity? Around 7 p.m. when the sun has gone down. People reach home, shops are lit, factories are still running, tens of millions of fans and air conditioners switch on at the same time. At that exact moment, solar output is collapsing towards zero. Wind can help, but it is not dispatchable on command. Hydro has limited water. What catches that fall every single evening, that too reliably? Coal. Coal plants ramp up at 6 p.m. and run through midnight. They are, in effect, the night shift in which solar cannot work. This is a constraint of physics. Electricity cannot be stockpiled. The electron that powers your fan at 7 p.m. has to be generated at 7 p.m. You cannot produce it at noon, putting it in a warehouse and then ship it 6 hours later. India is building batteries. It is building pumped hydro storage. That investment is real and it matters. But today, evening demand touches around 250 plus gigawatts and is projected to nearly double by the end of this decade. No battery fleet in existence can cover that kind of ramp up, at least not yet. So until storage catches up, the grid needs something that can respond in minutes on command every evening without fail. Today, that is coal. Not because anyone or everyone loves coal, because physics does not wait for transition to finish. Now let's look at this like an investor. India's power system moves in a straight line. Fuel at one end, coal, mines, gas fields, then the power plants, then the national transmission grid, carrying electricity hundreds of kilometers. Then the state distributor, the DISCOM, handling the last mile, and finally your meter. Power flows in one direction, left to right, fuel to meter. Money, on the other hand, flows the other direction. You pay the DISCOM pays the transmission company pays the plant pays the coal supplier. Which means everyone upstream gets paid only and only if the DISCOM collects. The entire chain, generators, transmission companies, miners, sits behind one choke point. And that choke point leaks. According to the government data straight from the Ministry of Power, AT&C aggregate technical and commercial losses at the national level range from 15 to 16% in FY 2024-25. It's down from 22% in 21, and that is real progress. But 15 to 16% still means 1 in every 6 units that leaves a substation never generates a rupee. Lost in aging wires, sometimes stolen, never billed, never collected, and that is only the national average. States like Bihar and Jharkhand, that number goes to 25 to 30%. To plug this hole, DISCOMs do the only one thing that they can, cross-subsidize. Households and agriculture get cheaper tariffs, sometimes free power through political promises. To pay for that, industrial and commercial users are charged much higher tariffs. But the industrial users are not captive customers. When grid power starts costing 7 to 8 rupees unit or more, large factories run the numbers and find that captive solar and backup energy brings their effective cost far lower. So they quietly deflect from the grid and move on to greener pastures. So what is left with DISCOM? More subsidized, loss-making consumers, fewer paying ones, even harder to pay generators and transmission companies on time. This is what I call a deadly spiral. The more high-paying customers leave, the more the remaining ones get squeezed. The harder it becomes to sustain the system, and the harder it becomes for everyone upstream to get paid. The investor question is simple. Who gets paid reliably, regardless of what is happening everywhere else on the line? Rule number 1, volume is not value. Generators, the independent power producers, the merchant plants sit at the production end of this line. They handle the most power, they face the most risk, government on one side capping their costs, regulator on the other capping their margins. DISCOM at the other end delaying their payments. High volume, compressed returns. Move further down the line, the transmission companies, their revenue is not linked to fuel prices, not to generation mix, not to DISCOM collections. It is linked to only one thing, availability of their network. Keep the lines up, collect the regulated return. That is the entire business model. Think of it as owning the plumbing of a system. The tankers can change, coal today, hydrogen tomorrow, but whoever owns the pipe earns every single time something flows through them. Then there is a second group, even less talked about, the critical hardware manufacturers, the handful of companies that make ultra high voltage transformers, 765 kilowatt switchgear, and specialized grid equipment. They sell the foundations that every part of the energy transition needs. Coal plants need them, solar parks need them, EV charging corridors need them, data centers need them. They do not care which fuel wins. They do not care about DISCOM payment delays. They supply what the grid cannot function without and collect from whoever is building it. These are the businesses that earn from every rupee of the 33.6 lakh crore super cycle, regardless of which generation technology ends up on the top. Here is a simple scorecard to carry out from this video. The further you are from the discom, the more your revenue is linked to infrastructure availability rather than fuel or collection. The more structurally sound your position is in this game of transition. Generators sit in the difficult middle. They handle the most power, but they absorb the most discom risk. Transmission companies and grid hardware makers are insulated from that. Their revenue comes from regulator and from infrastructure capex, both of which are locked in for this decade. I'm not giving you a buy list. Valuations matter, execution matters, capex cycle matter, but the business model structure points in the right direction. We started this video with a chart most people celebrated without reading the fine print. In part 2, the fine print gets even more interesting. China has built far more solar, battery and clean energy hardware than it can use at home. And it is now exporting that surplus into emerging markets, including India. At the same time, India is being invited into a global carbon credit market where farmers own the most valuable potential asset and are almost entirely kept out of that money. Who captures the new grid rents in that world? Who gets left holding that risk? All of that is in part 2. I'll see you there.